name is Marie Lazar. I'm an environment artist working in video games, and this is a brief tutorial on how to unwrap trees with seamless UVs. So this is a very old technique. I learned how to do this working on World of Warcraft many years ago. And the nice thing about this is that it only uses a single UV channel and no vertex colors or fancy shaders or anything like that. So it's going to be super performant for your game, even if you're running on mobile platforms. It does use a lot of UV mirroring, so if your bark texture looks bad with mirrored UVs, this isn't going to work well for you. But in general, with bark textures, a mirror line is going to be less noticeable than a seam. So to start with, I have this simple tree that I modeled. For this, it will be easier for you if the branches have an even number of edge loops. For the trunk, it doesn't matter how many loops you have. I gave this one 9 loops. That's a good number for a low poly tree. But for the branches, you don't need as many. You're probably looking at 4 or 6 loops for those. It will also help if your tree is modeled in quads. This isn't 100% necessary, but it will make it easier to unwrap. Also, you can go back in and cut as many tries as you want to after the unwrapping is finished. So you can see I'm in Blender, but this technique will work equally well in 3ds Max or Maya or whatever package you're in. On WoW, we used 3ds Max and made probably hundreds of trees this way over the years. So I'm going to start by defining where I want my seams. I'm going to pick a loop on the trunk and select it straight all the way up to the top of one of the branches. Next, I'm going to put in some more seams on the loops of the branches where they meet with the trunk or connect to each other. Uh, Finally, I'm going to add seams to loops running down the lengths of the branches. For this, it's going to be easiest if you pick a loop that runs all the way down the branch and it's not interrupted by another branch like this. It's okay if it is, it will just be a little bit of extra work at the unwrapping stage. I'm also going to pick edge loops that flow across the trunk and across the joining branches and don't flow down the trunk like this. You're going to see why this is important once we get into the unwrapping phase. Next, I'm going to switch into material mode so I can see my bark texture. I'm going to select the whole tree and do a basic UV unwrap. Now I'm going to orient all of the UV islands so that the bases of the branches are pointing towards the bottom of the UV space and the tips of the branches are pointing towards the top. And I'm going to do that with my trunk island as well. Now I'm going to straighten the edges of the islands. Now I'm going to straighten the sides of the islands, and I'm going to align the verts on either side of each island horizontally so that they match up with each other in vertical space. And then I'm going to select the border of the island and pin the verts. I have to do this for all of the branches and for the trunk, so I'm just going to speed up the recording here. With my border verts pinned, I'm going to do one more unwrap on the whole tree to smooth out any UV distortion. Now I'm going to work on unwrapping the trunk. I'm going to grab all of the UVs and scale them up until my trunk island fits exactly in the 0 to 1 space of my texture. I'll just grab the verts on the left and right side of the island and make sure that they're snapped exactly to the beginning and end of my texture, which happens to be a 1024 by a 2048. And if we zoom in on the trunk, you can see that seam is now entirely hidden. If you want, you can scale up the UV islands by 2 or 3 times their size, depending on what looks best for the resolution of your texture, but I'll stick with the base 1 unit wide. So now comes the tricky part, merging the branches together with the trunk. What I'm going to need to do for this is to fold the UVs of the branches over on themselves so that they're seamless. This is why it's easier to have an even number of edge loops on your branches. So I'm going to grab 1/2 of my branch and I'm going to scale those UVs by a -1 on X, and then I'll move it over the other half and I'll snap those border verts into place. You can see now that over that seam there is a mirror line. So if you're a 3D artist, every instinct you have right now is saying that this is not how UVs should look. You don't want your UV islands to overlap themselves. But you take a deep breath, hang with me. I promise it'll be fine. So I'm going to go through and fold over the rest of the branches like this. You might notice that sometimes it helps to triangulate some faces so that it's easier to grab exactly half of the UV island. So I'll just go through and do the rest of these now. Finally, I'm going to merge the branches back together and to the trunk, starting with the branches that are furthest away from the trunk and then working my way back towards the trunk. I'm going to grab the island for this child branch and then move it so the bottom of the island is just over that hole in the island of the parent branch, and I might scale it a little bit so that the size matches up better. And then using UV sync selection, I'm going to grab the matching pairs of UVs and then merge them together. Now, you might run into cases like this where the UVs on the child island and the parent island are flowing in opposite directions. So if you were to weld them together, you would get some nasty twisting in the UVs over that junction. So in this case, we're just going to grab the UVs for the child branch and then scale those to -1 on X uh, so that they align correctly with the UVs on the parent island. If we look at the tree, you can see the results. We do have some mirror lines down our branches, but we have no visible seams. Now that our unwrap is finished, we can go back in and maybe massage the UVs around the junctions and smooth out any areas that look gross. We can also triangulate some of these areas so that we have better control over the silhouette of the tree. Here I'm stretching out the UVs at the top of the trunk. From here on out, if you want, you can go back in and cut extra forms into your trunk. I'm going to pop some of the forms from my texture into the base of my trunk to make that look more interesting. And that's how it's done. I hope this tutorial has helped you out, and if you enjoyed this video, have a great day.